welcome back. This is Clémence with the Gourmandise School, here for day 4 of bread camp, which means brioche. Brioche is a very rich, very decadent bread. It's almost like cake, and its main feature is butter. So we're going to have like a butter themed class today, and we are going to learn how to make brioche dough. Then we're going to take a look at our sourdough culture, because just in a couple of days we'll be ready to make our sourdough bread, and we want to make sure that our starter is strong enough to activate and power the growth of the bread. And then we're going to make a babka filling. So we're going to take our brioche dough and roll it out into a rectangle, spread this like lovely fudgy filling on, roll it up, and then I'll show you how to shape and twist it into something like this. So you're going to take your brioche dough and make babka. Babka is the greatest thing ever, guys. It is chocolate and bread all baked together in this gorgeous, lovely mess of bread. We'll cut into this a little bit later at the end of class. But its main star really is the wonderful dough that we're going to learn how to make. So this dough, however, needs to sit in the refrigerator overnight before you can start to work with it. And I know a lot of you really want to make bread today. So what I'm going to do is to release the challah video today too, so that you can make your brioche dough, put it in the fridge, and if you want to, you can start making your challah dough and have 2 loaves of challah, one for today, which is Thursday, and one for tomorrow, which is Friday. And then you'll also on Friday have babka, which, you know, makes the world a better place. I will also include a 3rd recipe, and that is our light brioche dough. So if you feel like you have to have babka today, I'm going to include a recipe that can be finished, you know, start to finish in 3 hours. It won't be as buttery and rich as this one, but it'll do in a fix, and a fix is really important to us right now. Are you guys ready? Okay, so first things first. We made milk bread the other day, which was our most enriched dough. It had milk and cream and egg yolks in it, but it didn't have butter. And butter is really interesting because it's a much heavier fat with less water content than our cream and our milk that we use to make the milk bread. So our dough is going to feel a little different, and it's also going to be a little bit more difficult for the gluten structure to form when we make our dough. So I know we've been following these same steps, start to finish, for all of our doughs. We wake up our yeast with some liquid and oxygen and sugar, then we mix the dough, then we knead our dough, we let it rise in a blob, then we shape it, proof it, so that's last final rising before we bake it, and then we bake it. There's a little bit of a difference with this one. This recipe is so high fat that we have to mix in the butter after we've developed the gluten structure in our dough. So we're gonna make the dough real quickly together. I'm gonna put mine straight into the refrigerator, and then I made some last night, so I'll show you later how to roll it up and shape into a babka. But it's really important to understand how fat affects gluten structure, and then in order to get a nice lift out of your brioche, you're gonna need to add the butter later. For the light brioche dough I'll be posting, you don't need to do that because it's not as high in fat. So let's get started. First things first, we need to get our liquids in there. So I have milk here. So this is like a triple enriched bread. And it's about a 1/2 cup or 120 grams of milk. I've got 40 grams of sugar, which is about a 1/4 cup. I've got my yeast here. So we're using 2½ teaspoons of yeast, which is 7 grams, or 1 packet. It's really simple. And then we've got eggs. We're gonna need 3 eggs and 1 egg yolk. And I'm gonna put those all together in the mixer here. And I'm gonna crack my eggs first. It's always easier to crack your eggs on a flat surface. Other advantage of small kitchen, you can just throw things right into the sink and you never miss. And then I'm gonna need 1 egg yolk. Hang on, Savi, you gotta get into your Zoom meeting right now with your teacher. Okay, cool. Sorry, that's just the way it is right now. I'm gonna use this little bowl here to crack. So I'm gonna put the yeast in with the milk. I'm gonna go ahead and grab my egg yolk. It's always easier to separate your eggs like this rather than using an eggshell. The eggshell can really like contribute to getting a lot of shells inside your eggs, and it can poke the yolk, which is not what you want. So milk, yeast, sugar, eggs go in our mixer bowl. There we go. There we are, and sugar. Beautiful. And now I'm gonna add the flour and the salt. So I am using mostly bread flour. So about 60% bread flour and 40% spelt flour. Some of you have been experimenting with whole wheat flours because you're discovering that that's all that's left in the store. And some of you had great results because you cut back on the flour a little bit. If you're going from a white flour like bread flour or all-purpose flour to whole wheat flour, you're going to notice that everything's like really, really dry and dense. And I really want you to either hold back on the flour a little bit if you're going from a white flour to a whole wheat flour, or increase the liquid. Okay, some of you emailed some pictures of some really dense milk bread because you were using whole wheat flour. Just hold back about 10 to 20% on the whole wheat. Okay, I'm going to turn this on. We're getting a nice strong gluten structure in our dough, and then we will add our butter. Butter is really special. We're going to talk about butter a little bit later. We're going to make our own butter today so you can see how the process works and why butter is so fantastic. But let's get a really strong dough going first. Alright. Sometimes our dough needs a little help, so I'm going to get a spatula. Sometimes these big mixers have a hard time with slightly smaller batches of dough. So you got to give it a little love. And I'm not a big believer in having a lot of kitchen gadgets in your kitchen. The KitchenAid mixer is really my only gadget here. I barely have a food processor, kind of borrow it from a neighbor. So I make pie dough by hand. If you guys want to learn how to make pie dough next week, let me know if that's something that sounds interesting to you, but I teach you how to do it entirely by hand. But a KitchenAid mixer is really like the thing that's a game changer, especially when you bake a lot of bread. I bought mine used on Craigslist, something I recommend doing until you're able to register for one. Alright, so my dough is just starting to come together. I want to show you what it looks like. It does look a little bit dry, and that's okay. There we go. See how it looks a little dry? Don't worry about it. That's totally normal. I developed this recipe. Hang on a sec. I developed this recipe a few years back when a bakery in the building that the cooking school was in, our very first school, now we're about 100 yards away in a different part of the mall, but we were in a building that housed a bakery, and the bakery closed down, and so our neighboring restaurant took it over, and they needed a baker, and I really couldn't give it 100% of hours because we were teaching classes, so I had to come up with some base recipes that could be made once or twice a week and hold in the refrigerator so the baristas in the morning could take some, roll them out. We had like it taped how big, making the rectangle for the cinnamon rolls and sticky buns and babka, and then just put the filling on, roll it up, and let them proof while they were getting the coffee brewing. So this recipe works really, really well because it's low in hydration. Because there's less water available for yeast to wake up, you can hold this dough in the fridge for up to 3 or 4 days. So it's a great recipe to make, like to double, for example, and make brioche dough one day and then donuts another day. Maybe donuts is something we can do next week together too. We'll see, but I really like this recipe for donuts, especially when you sub out like 30 to 40% of the bread flour for spelt flour. So spelt, again, is this wheat that is going to give you a really custardy interior. You're not going to get the tallest loaf from spelt, but the flavor is really incredible. Okay, so I'm going to show you how the dough looks now. See how it all came together? I'm going to test for that window pane. Remember how we did this with our milk bread? I'm going to stretch the dough from side to side, and if I can see light shining through it before it tears, that means it's ready to go. See how it's tearing really quickly? It needs a couple more minutes. So I'm going to let it go another moment and go over how to get your questions answered. So today is Thursday. So today and Friday we'll be doing live Instagram chats with Q&A about bread or any kind of baking at 11 a.m. on Instagram Live. So if you're watching this, it's past that time. So tune in tomorrow on Friday at 11 a.m. live on our Instagram. And if you have questions outside of that period, you can't log on, email us at hotline@thegourmandiseschool.com. We're checking that 2 to 3 times a day right now, and I'm emailing you back as soon as we have an answer for you. Okay, I think we're there. watch. I'm going to take a little bit of dough, stretch it from side to side. Ooh, look at that. See how I can see light shining through it? It's not tearing too much. Now I am ready to add the butter. Okay, so I get this question a lot, salted or unsalted? So the only time it really matters on a chemistry level is when you're baking bread, because the more salt there is, the slower the growth of the yeast will be. So for this recipe, I use unsalted butter. For all my other baking, I use salted because I think everything that's sweet tastes better with more salt. When I'm cooking, I use unsalted butter because I'm usually reducing a sauce and I don't want it to be too salty. So I kind of go against convention and what you may have read in books. I bake with salted butter, except when I'm making bread, and I cook with unsalted. All right, so I'm gonna put all of my butter in, just a few chunks at a time. And what I want is for the butter to be cold but pliable. This is really important. If your butter is very cold, it's going to get lots of little tiny pieces of butter in your brioche, and you do not want that. What we want is for the butter to get fully incorporated. So if your butter is very cold, cream it first. It's in the recipe. Cream it in your KitchenAid with a paddle attachment, then scrape it out and set it aside, and you'll add it back in later. This butter was sitting out overnight, so it's just fine. We use Strauss butter. It's grass-fed and organic butter from Petaluma, Northern California, which is why it's so yellow. We'll talk about how beta-carotene affects the color of the butter, which is what the cows are eating when they're eating grass. All right, so we're gonna add our butter pieces a little bit at a time, making sure our butter is like pliable. That means I can bend it without it breaking. All right, here we go. So you could soften butter in the microwave or melt it. The problem with that is that you'll evaporate all the water that's in the butter. And butter does need a certain amount of water in order to balance things out in your recipes. And there we go. All our butter is in. Fantastic. Okay, so I'm having a hard time getting the butter to incorporate. Don't freak out if this happens. Watch. See how there's like butter on the sides and on the bottom? Actually, maybe what I'll do right now is show you how to knead this by hand, so that if you don't have a mixer, you know what to do, because whether we're incorporating the butter or kneading the dough, the motion is always the same. So I really like to use a tool called a bench scraper for this. It's right here, and we'll be using it again later to cut our dough. But when I'm shaping dough, I like to have one hand that's really clean and one hand that's holding onto a bench scraper. So I'm gonna dump the dough here. Okay, so I'm gonna take my left hand here, and I'm gonna use it to knead the dough. And the dough is already really strong, so it's resisting me a lot. Those gluten proteins are really tightly wound up because we've been mixing this dough so much. So all I'm doing is just trying to smash in the butter. And every now and then, I use my bench scraper like that. Gotta lift this up a little bit. I already got some on me. All right, so we're kneading and kneading and kneading, and our hands are gonna feel so good after this with all that butter on them. And all I want is for the dough to totally absorb all the butter. It feels really weird, but it's very satisfying. This one time, I was helping out two very dear friends. In Paris, they were doing a pop-up, and we had very little equipment and wanted to make donuts. So we were in like a tiny Paris basement kitchen kneading dough like this, and it worked just fine. Hi, Rose and Sasha. Wouldn't you rather be in Paris right now? Eating all the things. Go. All right, so let's just talk while I keep doing this until it all comes together. This is when you really appreciate the mixer for all its value. So to go back to the doughs that we've made, we had focaccia, which was lean. So focaccia is a lean dough that doesn't have any fat in it. And then out of all the breads we've made together, it's the one that had the most open crumb structure. That means on the inside, it had the biggest holes. And that's because there wasn't any fat in the way of gluten proteins developing and forming a web. So you have the opportunity to have these big open holes. Over here, with our enriched breads, we have everything from the sandwich loaf that we made yesterday to this. Because this has the most amount of fat, this is going to be the bread with the tightest crumb structure. Okay, I'm almost there. Getting a good workout here. I want this to look really smooth, so I'm going to keep doing this until you can see the texture that the bread should be. This is a very good way to get kids to do something with their hands and to be quiet. And then it yields you dough at the end. It's kind of a win-win. All right, here we go. Almost there. You see how the dough is starting to look a little bit more homogeneous and even? And I don't have to worry about kneading this really well because we developed all the strength that we needed in the dough when it was in the mixer, although you could have kneaded it like this by hand. So the motion is this. Try not to do this so much. Use the palm of your hand and stretch the dough forward and flip it onto itself. Ready? Stretch and flop it over. There's a lot of bakers with different techniques. Some of them do the slap and fold. So you take your dough and you fold it onto itself like this. So I'm putting the dough down, stretching it and flopping it over. And eventually it'll smooth itself out. Almost there. Okay. Again, you can use all bread flour for this. If you don't have bread flour and all you have is all-purpose or AP flour, don't freak out. You just won't get quite as tall a loaf of bread, but you should still make this, okay? And if you're gonna use any portion of whole wheat flour, cut back on the flour a little bit. You saw what the dough should look like. So just get it to that texture. And try for this recipe to just do maximum 40% whole wheat flour. Okay, there we go. Our dough looks really smooth and homogeneous. Everything looks even. There's no like chunks of butter anywhere. I'm gonna let this rise in the refrigerator for at least 6 to 8 hours, but you could go as long as a couple of days, right? Okay, so it's one of the reasons I really like doubling this recipe because this dough also makes really, really good cinnamon rolls. So you can look back at the milk bread recipe and here, let me show you how to wrap this up actually. In the milk bread recipe, and how we rolled out our rectangle and made that filling with the brown sugar and the butter. So I use parchment paper and pop it in the fridge. Alrighty. Okay, again, if you have any questions, email us at hotline@thegourmandiseschool.com. I'm gonna wrap this little tortilla. There we go. Lovely. And we are going to talk about our sourdough culture while we pretend that, 8 hours went by. All right, I'm going to pull out our little sourdough culture now. This may look familiar. Okay, do you see how bubbly it is? I don't want you to freak out if yours is not quite as bubbly as mine is, okay? It just needs a couple more days. But what I'm looking for is a lot of this bubbling action. Some of you are using rye flour, so what you'll notice is that it's not rising quite as much, and that's normal. It's about just seeing a lot of activity rather than it expanding so much. So if you're using a lot of whole wheat flour and making this stiffer or using rye, it's not going to lift up quite as much as this. I used mostly bread flour and I added a touch of rye flour because rye, just like a little pinch, rye is very, very exciting for yeast. So we're almost there. This is day 4 of our sourdough culture. I'm gonna pour half of it out and I'm gonna feed it some new water and flour. So here we go. Pouring half of it out. Going in a bowl that's going to help me make pancakes later. I'm going to pour some water in here and some flour. Again, you can do like 100 grams of water, 100 grams of flour. Depends on how big your container is here. And again, giving it lots of oxygen like this is really, really good. So beat it, beat it, beat it, beat it, beat it. I like to use a butter knife or an offset spatula. It's easier to clean. Ooh, it smells sweet and tangy. This almost smells like yogurt. And that's ideally what you're looking for. And when you're making your breads as well, unless you're looking for that super sour punch, what you're looking for is something that's like delicate, tangy, and a little bit sweet. Sourdough doesn't mean sour. It means it's a long fermented bread. Okay, here we are. I'm gonna get a new towel here. Ooh, this is a linen. I just want to shout out to a couple of linen companies who I really, really love in LA. This is from White Bark Workwear. I get a lot of aprons from Charlie, and I think he's just starting to do table linens, which are super lovely. And then this is from Atelier Associé. They use leftover materials from other sewing companies, and they make really lovely, unique, one-of-a-kind linens, like table linens and stuff. So Charlie from White Bark Workwear uses hemp only. That's his only material that he uses to make aprons and linens. And then Atelier Associé is great, and I'll include those links too. Both of them are based here in Los Angeles. All right, here we go. It's gonna go for its last day of like activating all the cultures, and then we'll turn it into a starter tomorrow, okay? All right. I think what I'd like to do with you now is to make butter. So let's talk about butter real quickly. When you milk a cow, raise your hands if any of you have milked a cow before, you end up with this liquid inside the bucket that looks and feels really uneven. And if you wait a few minutes, you'll notice that this fat will rise to the top. That is cream. And if you skim that off, please ignore my dog who's eating all the stuff that fell out of the fridge a few minutes ago. When you have this cream, you have a product that has a very, very short shelf life, because foods that are high in fat, low in acid, and high in moisture are the perfect breeding ground for like not good bacteria to grow. So when you're making butter, you're taking cream and you're removing something from the cream that helps it go bad quickly, and that's water. So you milk a cow, you end up with this uneven liquid that rises to the top, that is cream. You skim that off, and that's heavy cream. And heavy cream is really amazing and lovely, but it has a very short shelf life. In order to make foods last longer, you do the following things. You either remove water, so like you can dry an apricot in the sun, or make beef jerky. You increase acidity, let's talk pickles, and fermentation, so kimchi. Thank you, Jane, hold on. This right here, kimchi, food preservation 101. My friend Jane brought this over yesterday. We traded for flour. But yeah, like all the foods that last a long time are either really acidic because bacteria is not interested in living in a super acidic area. So like pickles, kimchi, all that. Low in moisture, beef jerky, dried fruit, or a blend of both. So when we make jam, we're taking fruit, which goes bad really fast, and we're removing moisture by cooking the fruit, and we're increasing the acidity by adding lemon juice. We're also adding lemon juice to encourage pectin to thicken, but that's a whole other class. But yeah, I just wanted to highlight like why it is that we would make butter. A, it's like a fantastic thing, but B, it's a way of taking this product that's so rich and like really important because it's full of great nutrients and making it last a lot longer. So I'm gonna get my ingredients here. This is cream. So there are a lot of really amazing dairy companies out there, and the best ones are the ones who feed their cows on grass or graze their cows on grass, and then when grass is not available, they give them dried grasses. That's hay rather than grains, because animals like cows and goats and sheep are not meant to eat grain. So grain will ferment in their stomach and cause a lot of gas and a lot of digestive issues, but they're uniquely designed to eat and process the cellulose in grass in order to make milk. And so we really love Strauss because they're grass-fed and hay-finished. They are very happy cows. It's a company that is really, really devoted to the organic movement. So we love them for that, and for developing the methane digester, which is a way to keep the dairies even greener, which is I think now required of all California dairies. So Strauss is the company we use for all of our dairy at the school. Hey, Zavi, do you need help with something?
Yeah, I found this.
Okay, try it. Go see Malcolm and let him help you.
Okay.
Okay? That's the real right now. So all you need is cream and agitation. So when we are taking milk and we're turning it into things that are gonna last a long time, like cheese or yogurt, we're using acids or cultures in order to make them really acidic and to dry them out. We use salt also to pull moisture away. But I think butter is really interesting because it's so unique in the sense that there is no catalyst in order to change the chemical structure of the milk or the cream. All we're doing when we're making butter is agitating the cream to pull all the water out. So for me, butter is the mechanical separation of fat from water, and making cheese is the chemical separation of the two. So I want you to take a look at this real quickly. I'm gonna pour some of this gorgeous heavy cream in here. You can do this with any heavy cream. It works much better with pasteurized or raw milk and not so much with ultra pasteurized. So the more you pasteurize or heat the milk, the more you destroy the calcium bonds that help cheese to form or butter to form. And so you'll often find stabilizers or thickeners in those dairy products. Okay, I'm gonna turn this on the mixer here. We're just gonna let it go. And I think while this is going on, I'm gonna show you how to make the babka filling. It's a little bit loud, the mixer. So I'm gonna talk loud over here while we make the babka filling. Okay. This is so good. All right, so we need to make that layer of chocolate that's going to get sandwiched and rolled up all in between the brioche dough. And it's very, very simple. You're gonna take melted butter. Also, we talked about the color of our butter. This is that Strauss butter. It's super yellow because grass contains a lot of beta carotene. And when the cows are eating the grass, they're producing a very yellow, lovely butter. Okay, so we have melted butter, powdered sugar. So it's about 4 ounces of melted butter, a half a cup of powdered sugar, and a 1/3 cup of cocoa powder. Okay, I'm gonna mix these all together, almost to make kind of a paste. Don't worry if you see little bits of powdered sugar, that'll all get absorbed. And then I think it's really important to add more chocolate. So I'm gonna grab some milk chocolate that I have up here. La la la. So this is from a really great company called Repubblica del Cacao. I'm gonna take some chocolate and chop it up finely because I don't want any big chunks of chocolate to tear through my dough. As much chocolate as you like here, okay? There's no judgment in this kitchen. Okay, I'm gonna finely chop it. Try to avoid buying chocolate chips if you can. Like once the stores are well stocked with good quality chocolate, and on our website we have a blog about how to buy chocolate either for baking or tasting. Because chocolate chips have a lot of stabilizers added to them so they can keep that cute little Hershey Kiss looking shape, but they don't melt down very well. All right, here we go. I don't care how much chocolate you add into this, okay? I'm gonna add all this in. Take this out. I'm going to keep these extra pieces to snack on for myself. There we go. Okay, this is our babka filling. It's really lovely. And in a moment, we're going to roll out our brioche dough, spread the babka filling on, and then roll it up. Our butter is almost done. That was really good timing. Take a look over here. See how we've gone past whipped cream stage? So if you've ever over whipped cream, you're on your way to making butter. I'm just gonna scrape the sides a little bit, put it back on, and wait for everything to work its magic. Okay, when my cream is about to expire, I will typically, and I know that there's not a whole lot more I can do with it other than milk bread. I'll typically use it to make butter, and then I'll freeze the butter because it lasts a really nice long time in the freezer. It's gonna start splashing a lot, so I'm gonna use one of my towels real quickly and turn it on all the way. I'm gonna peek a little bit. While that's turning, this is the spelt flour that I use to make the brioche. It's from a mill here in Pasadena called Grist and Toll. If you can get your hands on fresh flour wherever you live, it's a game changer. This is a whole grain flour, so the bran is still in here, which is why it's a little bit thirstier, which is why we hold back on the whole wheat flour a little bit when we're baking, because otherwise everything comes out really dry and dense. But the flavor of our whole grain flours is like none other. There is no flavor in white flour, so it's nice to play around with these whole grain flours or whole wheat flours. So just a distinction real quickly, wheat is a grain, so whole grain can be buckwheat, which is not wheat, it can be rice really technically, but whole wheat comes from wheat. Main difference between the two. Okay, we're almost there. I'm going to show you real fast that this is not quite done. It might look like it is. See this? Kind of looks like ricotta a little bit. It needs a few more seconds to be able to expel all the water out from the fat. If you have some very active kids that need something to do, give them a mason jar that's filled halfway with heavy cream and have them shake, 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 like all around the yard, all around the house, and within about 20 minutes, they should be producing butter. Look, it only took a few extra seconds. Da-da-da. Look at that. All right, here's the beauty of this. This is butter. And in a few days, this could be buttermilk. And that will last so much longer than the cream did too, because we've removed the fat that could make this go rancid. And now we're going to be able to let it sit so that it can culture. If you're using pasteurized or raw cream, that's fantastic because there's still some live things in there that, just like our yeast for their sourdough starter, can begin to ferment and create this lovely buttermilk. So buttermilk lasts a long time because it's a little bit acidic and it doesn't have a lot of fat that can go rancid. And the butter lasts a long time because it doesn't have water in it. And water is like this great attractor for bacterial growth. So we're not finished quite yet. We're going to take this lovely mixture here. All this butter. All right, I'm going to grab it with a flour sack towel. Even in our cheese making classes, we don't use cheesecloth. I find it really hard to use and clean and keep clean. So that sounded worse than it is. I'd rather use a flour sack towel, and you can get these at really any grocery store or online. You can get everything online now. But flour sack towels are so much more reusable than cheesecloth, and it's what I use for this and for making all kinds of cheeses. And I don't have to fold it over 1,000 times. Watch this. Ready? Here we go. That is some gorgeous butter there. Thank you, Strauss, for the gorgeous cream. I'm going to pop that butter in here and sprinkle a little salt over it. I don't really love adding the salt beforehand for two reasons. One is salt will prevent this from turning into buttermilk. So I'm going to put this in a jar and just let it sit at room temperature for a day or two. And the other part of it is like all the salt's really going to get lost in here. So I prefer adding the salt right here once the butter is done. So add a little good flaked salt, and you can knead it in there or mix it in. But that is some gorgeous homemade butter. A great way to use up cream that's going to expire soon. It's also a really fun thing to do with your kids if you need them to do something with their hands and get out of your hair, and just all over fun. I don't bake with this, and that's because I need a very specific percentage of fat to water when I'm baking. So typically in the US, when you're buying butter at the store, it's 81% fat. European style butter starts around 82 to 83% fat. And then you have, you know, really great dairy companies like Strauss, whose butter, thanks to a variety of factors from what the cows are eating to the breed of the cows, is producing butter that's 85 to 86% fat. And if you have questions about that, again, email us at hotline@thegourmandiseschool.com. I don't want to talk anymore. I just want to show you how to roll up babka. Are you ready? Let's do this. Okay, so little tiny bit of bench flour, just a little bit of flour on my surface. And this is my dough. It's been sitting in the fridge overnight. There we go. All right. Plop it here. So this recipe makes one really big loaf. If you don't want your loaf to be too tall, take a little bit of that dough and shape it like we did the milk buns and make yourself a couple of brioche burger buns. Super easy. Okay, I'm going to grab a rolling pin and very lightly flour the pin. And I'm going to roll this out into a rectangle that's 3 times as long as it is wide. I like ratios better than exact numbers, right? There's no wrong way to do this, but that'll give us a good canvas for our chocolate. All right, and I want to keep the ends squared off. It's because I make a lot of croissant dough and I get a little OCD with this. So here we are. Don't roll away. When you're rolling out dough, start from the center and move outwards, just like I'm doing here. It gives you a much more even surface. And then you don't get that dog bone effect quite so much. Okay, here we go. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and spread this babka filling on top. Give me 1 second. Okay. All right. So I'm going to take out some of these larger pieces of chocolate here. Okay. My babka filling is actually a little bit on the stiff side, so I'm going to warm it up because I don't want it to tear the dough. So hold on just a moment. It's a little bit softer now. Yes, this is the best part. Okay, and I'm going to spread this now. Can you guys see okay? Yeah. I'm going to spread this all the way to the edges, but I'm going to leave a little open space here at the top so that I can seal my roll. So this is not unlike making cinnamon rolls. Also, you can add in whatever it is that you enjoy. I really, really love adding almond paste to this. Like I just take a chunk of almond paste and I break it up a little bit here into on top of the babka filling. And I'm gonna roll this up. Get a little tension going. Don't make it too loose. Like don't do just this. Just pull it a little bit as you're rolling up. There we are. It's always good to have a slightly damp towel nearby to wipe your hands with. And I'm going to pull this up, just like so, all the way up. Seal it together. Okay, and I like to put the seam side down. There we are. We don't need this anymore. Okay, now I'm going to slice this in half lengthwise so that I can twist it. And I like to use the bench scraper for that. There you go. Straight down. You can use a knife for this if you like as well. And I'm going to take these 2 pieces and twist them together. Again, whoop, twist them together. I find it easier to start in the middle and then go to each of the ends. All right, I'm going to make sure this is nice and strong. Can you guys see? And now I'm going to cut this down in the center and take these 2 pieces and twist them together. There we are. There we go. And give this a little bit of surface tension there, and now I'm ready to put it in a loaf pan. Okay, you can line your loaf pan with butter if you like. I like to use parchment paper. I think foil will work as well. Okay, I'm going to pick this up, drop it in, and we're going to let our brioche, or babka here, again, brioche dough makes lots of different things, including babka. So our babka is the brioche dough plus that ribbon of chocolate. We're gonna let that proof for about 2 hours at room temperature. If it's really warm in your kitchen, 2 hours. If it's cold, 3 to 4 maybe. You can also let it rise overnight in the refrigerator. You have that option too. It's like double the recipe and make one each day kind of thing. So once your dough has increased by about 30%, it'll look like this. And now I'm going to egg wash it. Here we are. So I just take an egg, I beat it, add a little salt, just because I like to flavor the egg wash. And you're gonna get into all those crevices. Don't add too much egg wash, just enough. That is a thirsty dog. He's eating a lot of bread. All right, and I'm gonna bake it 350 degrees for, I'm gonna say about 40 to 45 minutes. The way you can tell your bread is done is by putting a thermometer in there. So you want your bread to be at 190 degrees. That's how you know that it's done. It's kind of hard with babka because the chocolate ribbon is going to read a lot hotter than the bread. So try to just stick it where the bread dough is. And every oven is very different. So if you have convection, bake this at 325 for about 40 to 45 minutes. If you have a regular oven like I do, 350 will work just fine. If you see it browning more than you would like, put it in a lower shelf and turn the heat down to about 300 degrees for the remaining time that your bread is in there. I hope that you enjoyed this lesson. I think it's time to cut into our babka. So here we go. And I'm gonna get my knife so you can see what it looks like on the inside. You ready for this? Da-da-da. Here we go. Look at that gorgeous babka. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread. It's okay if a few pieces fall apart. Yeah, look at that. So good. So this is almost 40% spelt flour, and it is lovely and gorgeous and super buttery. And I cannot wait to see how yours turn out. So keep sending us pictures. Come on Instagram Live tomorrow, Friday at 11 o'clock for a live Q&A. And let me know if you have any other questions. Have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.